Welcome everyone to the trial of Paulogia. Judges Andrew Loke and Cameron Bertuzzi presiding.
It's very he did cut that out. He cut it out. He did cut that out. He knew that it contradicted what his point was, and
this is so deceptive.
Yeah, that's really bad. That's really, really bad.
Why bother voting? He's guilty.
Well, we might as well make it official.
Welcome to Paulogia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians. On Monday afternoon, Cameron from Capturing Christianity took to Facebook and YouTube community to make the following proclamation. In today's 3.5-hour marathon stream, Dr. Andrew Loke showed that Paulogia deceptively edited video clips from multiple Christian scholars to make it seem they were espousing a view they weren't actually espousing. In our video, we played the original sources without the cuts and compared the two. It was really bad. I'm going to post that section of the marathon in a standalone video so that more people can see this deception for themselves. When I left Christianity, all I was left with was my intellectual honesty. So to me, this is an incredibly serious charge. One of Cameron's viewers even asked, was it intentional or did Paulogia miss the point? Cameron's one-word answer was incredibly damning. Intentional. If I'm wrong, I want to know it. And you deserve to know it too. Since Cameron wants more people to see my alleged deception, I'm compelled to do my best to ensure that my followers are among them. I'm not hiding from anything. But before we get to that, we need some rare behind-the-scenes insights. While I have nothing against multi-hour unscripted streams per se, ruminating unfettered at the speaker's whim, that's not what I do here. Here on Paulogia, we post edited videos. I spend an unreasonable amount of time on each one, obsessively cutting away every unneeded minute. Every unneeded second. I consciously think about how cutting just 1 second will ultimately save my audience 10 hours of their accumulated lives, on average. Not only do I edit my guests, including theist and Christian guests who routinely thank me after the fact for my smoothing efforts, but I also unapologetically, relentlessly edit down the video I'm responding to. Now, the reason to do response videos in the first place is to avoid being accused of arguing against the straw man. The speaker I'm covering that day may not represent every Christian, but they at least represent themselves, and we're hearing straight from their mouth. But that doesn't mean I don't also desire to spare my viewers from repetition and non-critical discussion. I even take care to improve their audio quality when I can, and trim ums and ahs or coughing and sharp breaths from the start of ending clips as I can. I take pride in making my interlocutor more succinct and precise than I found them, always retaining their narrative thread. I hate when my time is wasted, so by extension, I hate when my audience's time is wasted. Your personal video making philosophy may vary, but that's mine. That's established. Of all the apologists who have acknowledged or responded to my videos in one form or another, including those who seem to otherwise hate my guts, to the best of my knowledge, none have ever accused me of dishonestly editing. Until now. Obviously, past performance is no guarantee of future results. A murderer is no less guilty just because they've never murdered anyone before. It's entirely possible that I have now crossed a line and intentionally, deceptively edited people. So, let's all hear the accusations. Unedited, of course, even though I really want to, because they're way too long. Of course, as always, I'll be linking to these source videos in the description text for this video, so that, as always, you can and should investigate for yourself rather than taking my word for it. We'll start with the one that Cameron thinks is really bad.
Here we go.
The third consideration is that people can check out if there were indeed these eyewitnesses or not.
Okay, we're finally getting somewhere.
Right. So Paul claimed that there were 12 and then 500 and then another group. Now, the readers of his letters can easily verify if this is so.
So you take the appearance to the 500. You just ask any question and you don't know the answer. Who were these people? Were they in the south? Were they in the north? Were they in Galilee? Were they in Jerusalem? But what they saw? How many of these people knew Jesus really well? How did they see him? Really, how did they see him? 500 people, that's a lot. Now, it's got to be an approximation, but was there a receiving line? Is there a jumbotron? My point is that I don't know the answers to any of these questions. I can't name a single person who was there. Can't name a single person who was there. You can ask questions of these texts, and they turn out in many ways to be what I would call thin. They don't have thick descriptions, and they don't carry a lot of data with them. The 500 just isn't there.
Okay, so again, if you just look at this clip, you would think that, well, Allison disagree. It seems that Allison disagree, right, about the 500. Actually, but if you look at the original interview with Allison, you'll find that Allison himself actually agrees that there were indeed this group of people who had the experience. So it's not like Paulogia who think that there were only 2 people, but Allison agreed that there were indeed the 500 who had some sort of experience, even though we, according to Allison, we don't know what kind of experience they had, but Allison does think that there were this group of people. And he thought that this group of people were the post-Pentecostal crowd. So can you play the original clip from Allison, please?
I come back to this again and again and again. So you take the appearance to the 500. You just ask any question and you don't know the answer. Who were these people? Were they in the south? Were they in the north? Were they in Galilee? Were they in Jerusalem? I think myself that about the only thing we can know is that, or say is probable, is that it's post-Pentecostal. I can't imagine a crowd of 500 being gathered before the public proclamation of the resurrection at Pentecost. So I think this is a post-Pentecostal crowd. But what they saw, how many of these people knew Jesus really well? How did they see him? Really, how did they see him? 500 people, that's a lot. Now, it's got to be an approximation, but was there a receiving line? Is there a jumbotron? Some of the church fathers actually think this must have been something like Acts, a heavenly vision. So he's somewhere up in the clouds and, they can see him at once. Anyway, my point is that I don't know the answers to any of these questions. I can't name a single person who was there. Can't name a single person who was there.
Okay, so again, if you listen to Paulogia's version, he's cutting and pasting. And if you look at the original, again, you'll see that it is quite different. It is very importantly different, right? If you just listen to Paulogia's extraction, it seems that Allison doesn't think that there were the 500. But if you listen carefully to Allison, you will find that there is a very important part which Paulogia cut away, right? He cut away the part where Allison thinks that we can know, or it's probably true, that this was the post-Pentecostal crowd. This was a post-Pentecost event, right? So Paulogia, so Allison does think that there were this group of people, right? So and this is an important point because this point contradicts Paulogia's own hypothesis, right? Because Paulogia thinks that there was only 2 people, right, who had experience, but Allison thinks that there were more than 2. In fact, the 500 had also some kind of experience. So Allison actually disagreed with Paulogia, not me, right? So this is an important point. Now we need to distinguish between how many people had the experience and the quality of the experience. which was Allison's point. Allison says, no, were they, what did they actually know Jesus well? What did they actually see? Was it a jumbotron or whatever? That concerns the quality of the experience. But so we need to distinguish between the quality of the experience and how many people had the experience, right? These are two distinct points, right? Now remember, my issue with Paulogia, so I hope that point is clear, right? Now, I do address the quality issue in chapter 7 of my book, where I respond, right, to some of the concerns that Allison, similar to those that Allison raised, not exactly the same concerns, but his concern about the quality issue, right? I mean, the quality issue in general, I discussed in chapter 7, which people can read up. But at this point in time, I just want to focus on the how many people issue, right? Because that is the key issue of contention between me and Paulogia. And on this point, Allison actually agrees with me against Paulogia. And so I find it astonishing that he actually cited Allison against me by his cutting and pasting, which is deceptive, right? He cut away the key part to make it seem as if Allison disagreed with me. But when you check out the original clip, right, you'll find that actually Allison disagreed with Paulogia, right? So that is an important point.
Yeah, so, it's very he did cut that out. He cut it out purposefully because he knew that it contradicted what his point was, and this is so deceptive. Yeah, that's really bad. That's really, really bad. I mean, he's done that in a couple other occasions as well, but this one was just flagrant.
It's very apparent that he cut it out purposefully because he knew that it contradicted his point. A very serious charge. How could we test this? I suppose we'd have to first know what my point was. What did Dr. Loke say that my point was?
This point contradicts Paulogia's own hypothesis, right? Because Paulogia thinks that there was only two people, right?
Well, yes, that's part of my overall hypothesis. But I'm well aware that Dr. Allison disagrees with me on the number of witnesses. At the start, Dr. Loke uses my own clip to remind everyone that I'm aware that no Christian scholar agrees with me on this.
All right, here we go. Here's clip number 1.
Nobody thinks that there were only 2 resurrection appearances, one to Peter and one to Paul. Nobody thinks that.
I do.
Well, I think that is a very interesting clip.
So that can't have been, and very much wasn't, my point. Any more than that my main point is that the resurrection probably didn't occur. All the Christian scholars disagree with me on that, too. Checkmate, Paulogia. Okay, so none of that was my point in this section. What possibly could have been my point? Let's go back to the start of the clip.
Here we go.
The third consideration is that people can check out if there were indeed these eyewitnesses or not.
Right. Dr. Loke introduces this third section about whether people could personally check out the 500 witness claim.
Right. So Paul claimed that there were 12 and then 500 and then another group. Now, the readers of his letters can easily verify if this is so.
Dr. Loke puts forth his assertion that this claim could be easily verified.
So you take the appearance to the 500. You just ask any question, and you don't know the answer. Who were these people? Were they in the south? Were they in the north? Were they in Galilee? Were they in Jerusalem?
I hope it's apparent to all that my point was to show that Dr. Allison disagrees with Dr. Loke, specifically about whether these 500 people could be verified. This is the can they be verified section of the video, not did they exist section. Yet Andrew and Cameron are aghast that I removed Dale's completely parenthetical, tangential remarks about his personal post-Pentecostal theory. But that's why I removed it. That's an internal church dispute, not germane to whether any of the 500 people could possibly be verified. It's entirely unrelated. In my edited version, does Dr. Dale think that the 500 can be confirmed? No. In the unedited version, does Dr. Dale think that the 500 can be confirmed? No. We all know the Christian scholars disagree with my general conclusions. The question is, does Allison agree with the specific argumentation that Loke puts forth? In this case, he absolutely does not. Now, did I save my audience some time? Yes, I did. Did I keep all the relevant points about eyewitness verifications exactly on point? Yes, I did. Did I leave out a few words about an entirely irrelevant interpretation viewpoint and thereby keep things simple for those unfamiliar with post-Pentecostal phraseology? Yes, I did. Frankly, if I'd have left in that affirmation, my point would have been stronger. Even though Dale agrees the 500 existed, he still doesn't think that they could be verified. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, while you are fully free to disagree with the merits of my point, you can't find me guilty of dishonestly editing to prove my point just because my accusers really want me to be making a different point than I was. How could I have anticipated that? Now let's look at the other one, which frankly is the much more damning case. It's a little verbose, but again, today you'll be getting the long version.
Okay, play this clip, please.
Yep.
And yet, if we want to go down the evidence for persecuted preaching of actual eyewitnesses, how many does the Christian expert cited by Andrew think we have?
Of the 12, there's only 2 that we have very high confidence diet, historically speaking. And that's Peter and James, a brother of John, James, son of Zebedee. The others, I'm not even sure we can know at all what history is or where legend begins.
This willing to die argument doesn't boost your eyewitness numbers. The evidence doesn't support it.
Okay. Now, here, if you look at this clip, it seems that if you just listen to Paulogia, right, it seems that only 2 we have confidence die as martyrs, according to Sean McDowell, right? Peter and James. And then the others, we can't be sure at all. So this makes it, so if you just listen to Paulogia's cutting and pasting, right, from Sean McDowell, it makes it seem as if Sean McDowell argues that there's only evidence for only 2 who were actually martyred. Now, however, if you compare with Sean's original recording, you'll find that that is not the case. Can you play the clip from Sean's original?
Bottom line, I would argue that of the 12, there's only 2 that we have very high confidence diet, historically speaking. And that's Peter and James, a brother of John, James, son of Zebedee. And I would say outside of the 12, James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul, we also have very high confidence. And then there's 2 I would put in that middle range that are arguably more probable than not, but the sources are less and they're a little late. That would be Thomas and Andrew. And the rest of the 12, what's left of them, I think that's 8. I don't think we know when history ends and legend begins. The sources are late and they're contradictory. We just don't know that. That's the honest truth of, I think, where the history points.
Okay, so if you look at the original recording, Sean did not just mention 2. He actually mentioned James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul. We also have very high confidence. And then he argues that Thomas and Andrew, well, there is evidence for them as well. It's more probable than not. If you read his book, right, he says more probable than not, which means that there is evidence, right, for them. So it is actually 6. It is not just 2. So, Paulogia, his video is so misleading, right? He actually underestimated by 300%, right? From 6, he makes it seems as if there's only 2. Right? He underestimated, but he makes people think that there's 300% less, right? According to Sean McDowell. I mean, that is so terrible.
Okay, first note and least important note, but the endings of those clips are not the same. You'll notice that mine has Frank Turek in frame, and Andrew's is a solo shot of Sean. Frankly, I think the clip Loke showed actually made my point even better than mine did. So that's a good suggestion for me for next time. Also, just for my own math OCD, being off from 6 to 2 is underestimating by 200%, not 300%. You could say off by a factor of 3, I suppose, if you're trying to make it look bad. But this was a live stream and it was past midnight for Dr. Loke, and it's always best to be charitable. Anyhow, I'm going to agree with Dr. Loke here, that if you watch only the small section that he showed you, you could come away with a mistaken impression that I'm actually putting forth that Sean thinks that there are only 2 witnesses to resurrected Jesus, and that he proudly agrees with Paulogia on this point. However, just as Loke is objecting that the short clip doesn't accurately represent Sean's take, I'll object that Loke's clip doesn't accurately represent my take. First, let me play the next few seconds after Andrew's cut and paste.
History is, or where legend begins.
This willing to die argument doesn't boost your eyewitness numbers. The evidence doesn't support it. Most of these so-called witnesses simply disappear from history. We have no idea what they were willing to do. Check my playlist for several videos on this topic, including my direct interactions with Dr. McDowell. Just as Andrew's cavalier martyr comment in the initial video was incidental to Andrew's primary argument, but still a topic of significant personal interest to me, I wasn't giving it any kind of prominence in my primary critique. Instead, I was including Sean's clip in context of a larger discussion I've personally had with him. An ongoing discussion, so large and nuanced that it needs a whole playlist. Now, rewind my video back just before that clip, and I say this. Andrew is attempting to establish exactly who and how many actual witnesses to resurrected Jesus there are, and in particular that it's more than 2 to 4 people. Andrew is contending that in this portion of my video, I'm still pushing on my 2-person hypothesis. If so, why did I go out of my way to say more than 2 to 4 people just before introducing Sean? If I'm advocating 2, why did I say 4? Well, if you watch any part of that playlist, I strongly encourage people to watch for full context. Consequently, I know that Dr. Loke has, because when he took to Facebook to challenge me to a written debate, he included a link and referenced a specific timestamp from my primary Sean McDowell debate commentary video. Anyhow, if you watch my videos on the topic, you know that while Dr. McDowell's book puts forth 6 potential martyrs at the standard of more probable than not, you'll also know that I consider that standard to be too low for personal consideration.
I'm with Sean. I just lower everything. So when he says as plausible as not, I say not plausible. He has as probable as not. Those are the ones where I kind of look at it, but to me, those feel more like traditions. I guess I'm with Sean on all his assessments.
Except you just grade
that
them
I lower them all down.
Right.
And in the context of the aftermath of this discussion, Sean accommodated my higher standard of limiting the discussion to 4 people.
Is there anybody else that you have pretty high confidence for that they did die?
Those are the only 4 I think we can put in first century consistent early documents.
All right.
When you get to Andrew and you get to Thomas, now you're dealing only with mid to late 2nd century and 3rd century documents.
All right.
And that doesn't mean it's false. It just means our historical confidence goes down.
And we have really good evidence for 4, probably decent evidence for 2, and the rest we're not sure.
That's right.
After playing those clips, my on-the-record commentary is, at the end of the day, Sean has 4 yeses and 2 maybes. For the sake of time, I trust you've seen enough of our respective skepticism levels to know that what Sean calls probably, I'm going to call probably not. So I ask again, why did I specifically say more than 2 to 4 people before throwing to Sean? Was it because I wanted Sean to affirm 2 people? Or because I know that Sean and I agree on 4 martyrs, even though I think only 2 were actual eyewitnesses of any relevance for the discussion? This is consistent in all of my videos for anyone who cares to look. But Dr. Loke thinks I'm out there misrepresenting Sean's book.
Well, there is evidence for them as well. It's more probable than not. If you read his book, right, he says more probable than not, which means that there is evidence, right, for them. So it is actually 6. It is not just 2. So, Paulogia his video is so misleading right?
But what does the author himself think of my representation of his work?
Sean, let me throw to you. I said a lot of words, and I'm not sure it made a lot of sense.
No, that's fine. But I think you've laid it out pretty clearly that you've helped to kind of give the gradations.
And hopefully I didn't make any mistakes in there because that's from memory.
Well, let's ask Sean himself.
First off, thank you for reading the book and for being careful trying to get the assessments right. You did a good job.
In his response, Dr. Loke regularly admonishes me for focusing on something said in a video, but not referencing the broader body of work.
Yeah, he ignored that part of my book. So what I'm trying to say is that Paulogia makes it seems as if he has read my book, and he presented it in his video, right, for his audience, so that people who watch his video thinks that I have made a mistake. But actually that is misleading, right? Because the fact is that Paulogia hasn't read my book carefully. He has misread it, but he gives the false impression, that there's a problem with my argument, and then he conveyed that impression to people who watch his video and mislead people.
So allow me to echo some of those words back to Dr. Loke. People who watch your video will think that I have made a mistake, but actually that is misleading, right? Because the fact is that Dr. Loke hasn't watched my videos carefully. He has misunderstood them. But he gives the false impression that there's a problem with my argument. And then he conveyed that impression to people who watched Cameron's video and misled people. Now, if for some reason you had 3 hours of your life to spare and watched this stream with Capturing Christianity and Dr. Loke, you would come away thinking that Paulogia is a dishonest editor. And perhaps by now, Cameron has reposted these accusation segments as standalone videos, since he's declared on record that the most possible people need to see my terrible actions. And among Cameron's social media audience, you'll know that his accusations are somehow guaranteed to be free of misunderstanding, and Paulogia is unequivocally out to intentionally deceive people. Cameron knows my mind, my motivations, and my meaning. He's willing to paint me with that brush unequivocally. Forget addressing arguments. Cameron specifically announces his plan to poison the well against me, allowing any future challenge from Paulogia to be hand-waved away. Genetic fallacy be damned. Is this the intellectual side of Christianity that his channel motto espouses to? If you're a fan of Cameron's, is this where you want his discourse to go? I won't attempt to attribute any specific motive to Dr. Loke, but he himself admits that he approached this topic with a great deal of emotion.
I mean, I look at some of the comments in YouTube. I'm surprised at how many people actually says, "Oh, Paulogia, you did a good job." Paulogia, you have debunked Andrew Loke. But I'm surprised at how many people actually don't read my book. They just believe what Paulogia says, and they are misled by Paulogia, right? So I think Paulogia owed me an apology, for misrepresenting me. So I'm honestly quite upset about this.
And that leaves me at last with you, ladies and gentlemen, and other of my jury. Did I deliberately and intentionally attempt to deceive my audience through unethical editing? In the first accusation, I contend that Dale Allison's tangential musings about his post-Pentecostal timing hypothesis were exactly that. Non-relevant portions of Dale's free-form conversational interview. They weren't, in any case, germane to my point, and I could never in 1,000 years have anticipated that they were germane to a point that I wasn't making. No matter how badly Andrew and Cameron wish that I were making a different point. On the second accusation, I will admit that hearing that clip without background knowledge of my history with Sean could be misleading, and I will strive in the future to keep in mind that someone might want to pull a clip outside of its context and infer the worst. It is difficult to control how one might be misinterpreted or mined. However, today I have shown the full context of what Andrew isolated, which included my acknowledgement of Sean's strong case for 4 martyrs, and my appeal to my broad work on the topic, over putting any weight on what was intended to be a mere interjection, not bearing significantly to the topic at hand. So, was it deceptive? And if so, was it intentional? And with that, the defense rests. Please let me know in the comment section your verdict. At least for the first few weeks this is live, I promise to carefully read any and all constructive criticism that you may have, and to take it seriously to heart going forward. As I mentioned earlier, when I left my faith, the only reward waiting for me on the other side was intellectual honesty. So I take intellectual honesty incredibly seriously. No matter what else comes of this, it has been a reminder to myself against complacency, against making assumptions of what my audience might be perceiving, and to stay vigilant. And if you happen to have any comments for Capturing Christianity, or for Dr. Andrew Loke, I'm sure you can find a place to message them directly. That out of the way, I am very excited to take a look at the 2 remaining hours of Andrew's response, and providing my own responses about what my channel and Cameron's channel should be about. Ideas and evidence, something that seems to be in short supply. Until next time, later.